God be in my head and in my heart, in my understanding.
Amen. Amen.
Please be seated. I want to go back to the Old Testament reading we had this morning, to the first few lines of it. I think sometimes, I don't know if you're like me, by the time we've read through all of them, I'm not sure what the first reading was. So, let's go back to those readings from the book of the prophet Isaiah. Isaiah says, if you remove the yoke from among you, the pointing of the finger, the speaking of evil, if you offer your food to the hungry and satisfy the needs of the afflicted, then your light shall rise in the darkness, and your gloom be like the noonday. You know, life is full of choices. And the reality is that what we choose can make a huge difference, not only in our own lives, but also in the lives of our communities in which we live and move and have our being. In this morning's reading from the book of the prophet Isaiah, God, through the words of the prophet, highlights a choice that is in the hands of the people the prophet is speaking to. They have a choice before them to make. And here's the situation in which these people find themselves. It's sometimes after the return of the people to Jerusalem, 70 years of exile, so it's probably not the same people who left, but their descendants who have now come back. They return with great joy. They've returned with exultation and praising God for bringing them back out of all these years of exile, and for returning them to the land that they believed had been promised to them. They had a task, however, and their task was to build a new life together, to rebuild the temple and the city and their life together. But the project was not going well. And if we had gone back to some of the verses just before where we started this morning, we would see some of the things that were concerning to the prophet and the prophet believed were concerning to God. Here's the way Brian C. Jones described the situation on the Working Preacher website. He said, and I quote, "Rebuilding the temple and the city was moving slowly, perhaps stalled completely. Leadership within the community was contested. Divisions and violent quarreling hindered progress in both physical and social restoration. Drought and food shortages exacerbated the social strife and made rebuilding difficult. Economic and social inequity, homelessness, hunger, lack of clothing, all these things threatened the stability and the identity of the returned community." Sounds all too familiar, doesn't it? Contested leadership, violent quarreling, hindered progress, economic and social injustices, environmental catastrophes like drought. The words describe not only what we are experiencing now as a nation, but also what happens in our own community of Knoxville, Knox County. And the only message that the prophet Isaiah brings to us from God, the only message he brings to us this morning, is that we need to choose. We need to choose to be the change we want to see. Hear the words again, this time spoken to us. If you remove the yoke from among you, the pointing of the finger, the speaking of evil, if you offer your food to the hungry, and satisfy the needs of the afflicted, then your light shall rise in the darkness, and your gloom be like the noonday. Notice something here. Isaiah is simply telling us the truth about what it takes for a community to be the kind of community that we all want, to be the kind of community that we all desire. The truth about what it takes to be the kind of community that we all believe and trust God has promised to us. Speaking for God. Isaiah calls us to march on into the rising light. And he tells us that the only way to do so is by focusing on the well-being of the most vulnerable in our midst. It's what I've always liked about St. Luke's as a parish. As a parish, we've always remembered what it means to be a part of this East Knoxville community. And I think that today we continue to seek ways to offer food to the hungry and to satisfy the needs of the afflicted in our midst, in this area that is one of the food deserts in our city of Knoxville and our county of Knox. That's why I was thrilled to see Deacon Ron's report in the, I guess it was the vestry minutes, or it was a report that he was giving to the vestry at the last one, where he talked about the same thing he talked about this morning during the welcome, about collaborating with the Reverend Chris Battle to secure a grant from the Diocese of East Tennessee's Opportunity Fund, a grant for this exciting new ministry. So the new ministry, the Veggie Van, is growing out of Pastor Battle's already existing ministry of Battlefield Farm and Gardens. How many of you are familiar with that? Yeah, it's been a wonderful ministry that has expanded over time. And Ron's collaboration with Pastor Battle gives the Episcopal Church in general, and it gives St. Luke's in particular, an opportunity to participate in this new Veggie Van venture. Because if Ron is working on that with Pastor Chris, then what he's saying is that the Episcopal Church and St. Luke's in particular is willing to be one of the many sponsoring agents for this exciting new ministry. There was a recent article in Shoppers News that talked about this new ministry. And the author, Carol Shane, reminded us of how it started from just a little bitty thing. How many of you know where Tabernacle Baptist Church is? Just down that way, not too far. And it started with them just taking a plot of land over there and growing some fresh vegetables and leaving them there for people to glean from. Yeah, anybody could stop by and pick up fresh vegetables. And then after that, it began to grow, and Pastor Battle eventually left as the pastor of that church and founded Battlefield Farms and Gardens. That was back in 2018. And then more recently, that's grown even beyond that, as they began the east side of Farmers Market. You know, we have these wonderful farmers markets all over town, but here where we needed it the most, we had none. And so they found it. Well, that's just right down Martin Luther King as well. So with the leadership of Chris Battle, they've pulled together many people and organizations over a long time to address food insecurity in East Knoxville. In the article, though, Pastor Battle tells how this Veggie Van idea got going. And I just love the way it kind of just grew up, to take a pun there in terms of gardens. He got a call from Concord United Methodist Church, I think he said sometime last year. And they said they had sweet potatoes. How many did you want? They had a lot of sweet potatoes. He ended up taking 1,800 pounds of sweet potatoes. And he advertised their availability on Facebook, just because usually when he would do that, people would show up all over the place and take them. But he got to thinking, he says, about people he was really trying to reach most. People in this area of town, basically. People that don't always have transportation, and sometimes don't have any connection to the internet, or maybe not as good a connection as you might want to have. And so he tried to start figuring out, well, how do I get these 1,800, or at least some of these potatoes, how do I get them to these people? And all of a sudden he says it hit him. Get a vegetable truck. So he simply took his own truck, used it for a while, and then eventually, with the help of just a whole bunch of people from organizations all over Knoxville, He was able, with donations, to buy an offline school van from Emerald Youth Foundation. And then, of course, that wasn't set up to hold all these vegetables and to give them out of. So there were people from all over the place that helped in refurbishing. Some of them provided money, but a lot of them just provided hands-on help from organizations and churches and just individuals that kind of saw it and wanted to help. So that today they have an actual van, and they have converted it to haul bunches and bunches and bunches of fresh produce, things like corn, okra, tomatoes, squash, melons, blackberries, bell peppers, and you name it, whatever's there. The program depends on grant money to purchase produce from the Knoxville Farmers Market. Knoxville Farmers Market, this is fresh produce, but if they don't sell it in one day, they don't want it to go bad. And so with grants, Veggie Van will be able to purchase that food and then take it down into the different neighborhoods in the van where people can go and get those for free from them. An incredible ministry here on this side of town. And that, my friends, is how brightly a community's light can shine when leaders and citizens and organizations and churches work together in the communities, along with communities of faith, for the well-being of all. What a wonderful opportunity for St. Luke's and for the Episcopal Church to participate in this ministry as a way of responding to the call from God that we hear in Isaiah today. What a wonderful way to help remove the yoke from among us all in our community of Knoxville, Knox County, by offering food to the hungry, satisfying the needs of the afflicted in our own community, specifically here in the food desert where it's needed the most. So we give thanks for Pastor Chris Battle for launching this ministry, and thank you, Deacon Ron, for taking the initiative to collaborate with Pastor Battle so that both of you can lead all of us as we march on into the rising light. Amen.
Amen.